episode 64. My name is Dave Hunt, and I'm joined by Michael Swick.
How's it going?
Good. I hope this number's right, because I just rely on you for whatever you put in there.
And sometimes I forget. Yes, it is 64. Let me check digitaldaysgaming.com.
While he's doing that, if you're listening to 64 twice or the first time, we are Digital Days Gaming. We stream on Twitch every week. We've been doing a couple Tuesdays, and we were kind of just talking about, depending on my work schedule, that Tuesdays might be the day because we get some engagement with the viewers, and it also gives us a chance to get some news going, after the weekend. But we'll see. But the show, the main releases every Thursday morning at 6 a.m. on the podcast services of your choice. If you are listening to us on Spotify and we are still having a challenge, please let us know. Tweet us, email us. We went through a little bit of weird things with Spotify, but I think Michael got it all figured out. But if you're still having challenges with Spotify, kind of let us know what's going on, and we will see if we can fix it. But other than that, any other podcast service you use, we should be on. If we're not, let us know that as well. And if you are able to leave us a review, a written review with stars or points or whatever your uses is always helpful. And then just sharing the show. I've noticed a lot of the podcast apps have the ability while you're listening for you to share to social media. If you could do that, that would be a huge help to let some other people see that you're listening to our show, and maybe they'll check it out. Other than that, any other link that we have to social stuff, PayPals, Patreons, all that fun jazz is in the description and as well as in the show notes. And we are going to jump into relatively light news week, but I'm sure there'll still be some discussion points around it. So,
yeah, this is a follow-up to last week because it was announced just like as soon as we finished recording. I think the next day on a Wednesday, it was just casually dropped because I guess just there wasn't much to the announcement other than Ubisoft is now working on a Star Wars game. This Star Wars game is rumored to be, or kind of confirmed, it's weird, like no one's denied it, but it's
open world.
Based on a studio and a publisher, it's open world. But Massive Games is going to be working on an open world Star Wars game. It's going to be headed by the director of The Crew and Division 2. No release date, no platforms, nothing. But the EA deal was reportedly just a 10-year deal that Disney has decided not to re-up with them. So 2023, I guess, would be the earliest we can see this game because of the EA 10-year deal exclusivity with Star Wars.
Which makes sense based on looking into more of this with Massive doing it, as well as the recently announced Indiana Jones games from Bethesda, of where they announce their games and then you see on their sites that they're hiring people like senior writers and artists. So these games are relatively early on of development. And then similar to what I feel like there's, like we talked about last week, there's always been like a concept built around, and then they kind of put the best way to describe it would be the skin on the game. And this might be an open world type game that Massive had been building. I'm presuming and guessing similar to the Division's structure, and then now they can kind of put a Star Wars theme / skin to it, and they're hiring people for that.
Yeah, and it's a great way to get people to want to join your studio is to announce that you're working on a Star Wars game. And it can be kind of, and it's an open thing as opposed to, we'll talk about a story later, where companies will say they're working on a game, but they can't tell you what game they're working on. So you don't know what you're getting into as a developer. But now, if you're going to try and work for Massive over the next couple of years, you're going to be working on a Star Wars game. Dave.
Right.
When this popped up, I just assumed you got excited because you're a Division fan.
Yes.
You do still like the Ubisoft open world type games. I'm a little less excited. I guess when I heard, I almost want the Assassin's Creed team to be the one that's working on this. But I totally see why they would want to go this direction with Star Wars. And again, Ubisoft's one of those studios. Yes, Massive's working on it, but every Ubisoft studio in their umbrella is going to touch this game.
Yeah, that's my first concern off the bat is, okay, so what does this mean for the future of the Division franchise?
That was my question for you.
We've always talked about studios overstretching their bounds. So it's rumored and almost confirmed that Massive is working on an Avatar game that's going to come out when the next Avatar movie comes out. That's been known for like 2 or 3 years. And they have a game as a service in the Division franchise, and now they're doing Star Wars. So, do I want the Division Star Wars? Kind of. I think that would be somewhat cool. Do I want a Star Wars game that has min-max stats in it? No. Do I want a third-person cover-based cooperative story of Star Wars? I think that would be really cool.
And I'm the opposite with that.
Okay. But I think you want a linear one-player, like if you want an Assassin's Creed style studio making it, you probably want a hero-focused linear open world is contradictory to each other, but like you play as one character when you play Assassin's Creed.
Yeah. I don't know. Anytime, like, just like when the Battlefront games were announced, and it was just like, oh, it's this multiplayer game where you're all just shooting around. And, like, I know Star Wars, there's a big part of it is guns and shooting and stuff like that, but there's something about me where that's not why I like Star Wars. So I would prefer a more single-player focused game, which this could still have that component. It's not like you couldn't play the Division does. You can play the Division 2 by yourself for the most part and still have it a good time. I'm kind of hoping of more of a focused story from it. But I said earlier, like, I totally see why they would do this. This just makes perfect sense for them to do that. Do you have any guess on what part of the universe this will take place in? Because it seems like Disney's kind of done with the current trilogy timeline and are going to probably go back to nostalgia.
I seem to think, I was going to say, I seem to think that, especially with like the direction they're, like what it appears like they've been going with Mandalorian, is I could see it taking place in a similar time frame to that, like after the episodes, after the issues of episode 6, kind of like post, because we know there's a significant gap between episode 6 and episode 7, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I feel like that time frame of going through with where that took place. Off the top of my head, I don't remember where in the timeline Fallen Order fell.
It was in between, like, the original trilogy. Like, somewhere around there, I believe. So,
but at the same time, there is, something could be really, really cool to tell, like, an end. I know Anakin is kind of, like, pushed off as the Anakin to Darth Vader transition was kind of, like, sped through, but to maybe play a storyline that delves and rips farther into that of why he turned, I think would be really cool. The stuff that they hinted at when he was being, or even Kylo Ren's, change as well. I think that has potential to be really good.
I wouldn't be surprised if it turns into like Clone Wars with that type of art style for something like that. If you want to do something completely different,
I think if they were trying to get it out quickly, yes. But I think that the time frame with this, Julian Garrity, who's the director of it, like you mentioned, who did The Crew 2 and Division 2, he has pretty much said almost 6 or 8 months ago, I feel like now, that he is not working on the Division and he's working on a newer project, which now we find out that this is that newer project. Again, do we know if, like, 6-9 months ago that they knew that they had this Star Wars game, like, in the pipeline? I don't know. I think that Ubisoft is a big enough company and a trusted enough company that they got permission to start on this with being told, like, when this can come out. If to your point, if Lucasfilm Games was that adamant about the 10-year deal ending, then I'm sure that they made sure that they have games that are coming out in the 11th year, and that's what we're starting to see now. So they could have been negotiating these deals with the, saying, hey, you got to stay quiet until we tell you, obviously. But, Julian, who has, I felt been very, very good in terms of what he was able to do with the Division and then leading into the Division 2. I do have some faith in him. Do I want a Star Wars games as a service? I don't think so. But I do. I'm kind of caught in between. Like, I still think it'd be playing a Star Wars game with 2 or 3 friends going through a campaign would be awesome. Yeah.
Do you think between now that we know, like, Star Wars is open for business, and Disney seems to be moving away from the newer trilogy, do you think there's, like, a bidding war for, like, who gets to make the Mandalorian game? Like, because that's, like, the hottest property, and I think that's why Disney's pivoting. Is because, like, they probably were fine just using the current characters that they made because they're iconic, whether you like the movies or not. But Mandalorian has caught fire that they probably weren't expecting.
Yeah, I think that they thought Mandalorian was going to do well. I didn't think that they thought it was going to do that well. Like, Baby Yoda's like everywhere in terms of like merchandising and stuff.
Yeah, because like, if you were going to say like, okay, if Star Wars was going to start taking, or Lucasfilm was starting to take the bids for a Mandalorian game, is there a studio you would want to tackle like a Mandalorian game?
To be honest with you, I don't know, because I want to say that I don't feel like that we've seen enough of his potential combat in the show for me to make that call of like who I'd want to see work on that. But I mean, I guess like to your point, like he does have the ability to, you know, Mandalorians do have the ability to take care of things from a distance, but also are very good at hand-to-hand combat. So an Assassin's Creed style thing of a melee combat could be very cool. You know, stealth style.
Yeah, I to me, I picture like Naughty Dog, even though I don't know if Naughty Dog's combat would hold up that well, but I guess you don't need a ton of combat for the Mandalorian, or you can use Naughty Dog's combat in a Mandalorian type thing, or maybe like a Rockstar games sort of thing.
I mean, I know they're busy, but I would Rocksteady. Like,
yeah, Rocksteady would be good. Yeah, for Mandalorian. Yeah, I'm just waiting for the next like studio to like announce, because we're probably gonna just hit the point where there's just gonna be a shit ton of Star Wars. Yeah,
I thought it was just gonna be last week. Like I even tweeted something out like, okay, what do we hear today? Because like on Monday we got something, or on Monday we got Lucas, and Tuesday we got Indiana Jones, and Wednesday we got Ubisoft Massive, and I was like, okay, what's Thursday and Friday gonna bring? And then it was kind of like nothing. Or I'm hoping that there is, like to your point, maybe not Star Wars, but I'm hoping there's something Lucasfilm Games owns that we've kind of forgotten about, and we're like, oh, that would be really cool. I don't know what that is. So
yeah, I was like looking at their properties. I mean, it's heavily Star Wars and Indiana Jones based, but Lucasfilm made a ton of games, you know, in the 80s, 90s. So there's definitely a library that they can pull from, even though a good chunk of those are going to be like adventure games. But it was just I'm getting ready for a bunch of Star Wars stuff to
so
come
like
out.
Glorious War put it in the chat, like Sony Santa Monica or Naughty Dog, like you mentioned. Do you think that Sony has a desire to make an exclusive, like to pay for? Because I feel like we talked about that with the Bethesda thing, like we don't know if that is or isn't going to be exclusive, and it's also not as exclusive limited as a Sony exclusive would be, meaning PS4, PS5 versus at least Xbox and PC and cloud potentially. Do you think that one, Sony wants to, two, Sony will pay for it, and three, Lucas will allow it?
So I think Sony is less open to publish a multi-platform game unless they have to. We'll have to see how MLB The Show goes. I guarantee that was not their choice. Because I still think the Indiana Jones game is going to be exclusive to Xbox, just because why wouldn't it be? But Microsoft would probably be more friendly to release it on multiple platforms because they publish games on other platforms. But
even so, like I still feel like Microsoft's exclusivity, as I'm using air quotes, is less restrictive than Sony's is, because Sony's is PlayStation.
Yeah, for sure. Microsoft does have the ability of being like, yeah, we also release games on PC. I don't know if Sony... I only see Sony pursuing something like this if they can have it exclusive on PlayStation. You know? It's like MLB lives in its own bubble to where like Sony's locked into having to publish that for as long as baseball exists. Absolutely. Because they can't lose that. And that even if that money even if that game lost money, I think they would still be into just like, we need to produce it. It's our prestige thing that we always produce. But I don't see them going out of their way to try and get in on that Star Wars, especially if they potentially know that like a Microsoft might publish it, you know, or if a Microsoft gets an exclusive or gets like one of their studios to work on it, there's a chance it'll come to their platforms.
Right.
So maybe Indiana Jones is the thing that decides that. If Microsoft is like, hey, Indiana Jones is exclusive to us, maybe that then kicks Sony into being like, let's negotiate to get ourselves an exclusive Star Wars property.
Do you also see Sony listening like essentially having Lucas pull the strings of what is or isn't going to be in the story. Because like I don't see Druckmann listening to anybody in terms of what he wants his story to, how they want the story to be told. Like I don't.
If George Lucas was still involved, I would probably say that would be a concern. But the way Disney lets Marvel handle itself, I feel would be the same way with Star Wars. Just license it out, let them do whatever the hell they want, and let them run with it. Mm-hmm. So I could imagine Disney would just let Star Wars do whatever they want. And if you give it to like a Neil Druckmann, you know that you're not gonna.
Yeah. Or like a Cory Barlog too. I'm just using that as an example. So.
Yeah, but if you give it to like a Naughty Dog or a Santa Monica, you know what you're getting to, or what you're getting into. So you probably aren't going to try and call shots if you're handing it to those studios, as opposed to Ubisoft, where yes, they have creative directors, but Ubisoft to me just feels like an entity. Like it's an incubator to where like. Disney, if they wanted to, can call their own shots with Ubisoft, and Ubisoft would probably be like, yeah, sure, whatever, let's just do this. I don't see that being the case with, like, a Sony studio.
Agreed, and I think that would be part of, in the contract negotiation of creative freedoms, and, like, I think Sony would want tremendously a lot more, and they've earned it, but I don't know if, and maybe I'm wrong, but, like, I don't know if, like, Lucas or Disney would want to give them that much freedom,
Yeah, especially as they try and reconfigure like what they're going to do with Star Wars for the next 10 years to forever. Because they were really all in on the new universe, but it sounds like, they built like their additions to their parks in the new universe, and they're already apparently walking that back because Mandalorian's so popular to where they're just like, okay, the additions to the park, they don't take place in a specific timeline. So I'm guessing they're going to be a little less restrictive in terms of like when they go to these studios and are telling them like, hey, just pick a time, go for it. You don't have to, this doesn't have to be a Rey story. This doesn't have to be a Kylo story or a Finn story. Just take it, do what you want, use whatever characters you want, except this character, because Ubisoft's doing something, or this character, because EA's still doing something. So I see them being a little bit more open and free with Star Wars, just because it's worked out for Marvel.
Yeah, I mean, and it was interesting. Like, people are going, comparing it to like the Spider-Man and Insomniac. I mean, but again, that was a partnership because Sony already owned Spider-Man. So, but
even then, they didn't own the game rights until
the
Holland trade happened, or whatever. Which I still would love to know all about how that all went down. All right, next story would be a quick one. To the surprise of no one, I think, Hogwarts Legacy has been delayed into 2022. I believe this was slated for like second half of this year. But they just kind of went out and just tweeted like, hey, we want to make sure this game's good, and we're going to give more time to our developers so they can get it right the first time. This will definitely be the thing that we're probably going to see now, between now and March, of this studio's moving. Do you
classify this as a delay though? I mean, they showed, I guess, I mean, they showed a trailer, they said 2021, and now they're coming out in very early 2021 saying it's not coming in 2021.
Still counts.
Okay. I mean, I think it's expectations versus reality of like any time that a game company releases a trailer, I think that most people expect to see something. And I'm just as annoyed as the next person of when I see 2021 and then I see a delay, or I see something in 2019, say 2023. I'm like, what the?
Yeah. Well, I think this, if anything, is more of they don't want to have to deal with this question. Like, oh, when's it coming out this year? When's it coming out this year? This is them just getting out of the way of just like, you know what? Yeah. We're just going to be upfront. This game's not coming out this year. It's coming out next year, and then who knows what happens next year.
How much do you think, it's our next story, but how much do you think the Cyberpunk debacle played into this of going, hey, we don't want to keep delaying?
Oh, I think it completely plays in this thing. This is when we were talking about Cyberpunk late last year of like, the stuff that happened with Cyberpunk will have an effect on the gaming industry throughout. And I have a feeling just how that went down, they're just, you know what? let's just get out of the way of ourselves. Let's just delay. There's no reason for us to rush this game out. Delaying this just helps this game. One, they can figure out, how to work around COVID still, because that's going to be a constantly fluid situation. Because I have a feeling, halfway through the year, we're going to get a lot of people being like, offices are open, go back, and then they'll have to shut down again. So they're still trying to work around that. And then hopefully, J.K. Rowling becomes a less controversial figure. Because that is, when this game was announced, she was like at her most vocal. The game was trending.
The game was trending for the wrong reason the day it was announced. So.
Yeah. So the more time that they buy, the better for this game, because I feel bad for the developers, being like, we're so excited about this game, but then J.K. Rowling tweets something and then it just pisses off the fan base. So getting further away from all that stuff helps them significantly. So this just makes sense, and it just, we won't have to hear, hey, is Hogwarts coming out?
Who's the first, I'm trying to think about the best way to word this question to you. Who's the first 2021 announced game that won't announce a delay, but will pull prior gen support?
Who?
And I know, you don't have a list in front of you to make that call, but I'm saying that whether it was at the Xbox showcase, a Ubisoft forward, the Sony event, blah 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 blah. Who is going to sit there and say we're coming to PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series, and we're coming in September of 2021, and in March or April we're going to see. Due to the challenges of development, we unfortunately have to not release on prior gen in order to make sure that we provide the best gaming experience possible for our community.
I feel like any of the PlayStation announced games will hear that, because Horizon, and I think God of War was even mentioned as being out last gen. I feel like those are a given. Like one of those, depending on which one gets, I don't think both of those are coming out this year. Whichever one comes out next year is the one that gets removed. So
you're assuming that one of those games is going to bleed to 2022. Is kind of your basis on that, anyways. Okay.
Yeah, and
which
then you'll just
we
casually
talked about before.
Yeah. Suicide Squad wasn't announced for last gen, right?
It was not.
It was only okay. So because that was the one that popped in my head right away.
I feel like that one's 22 because Gotham.
No. It is 2022. That one they did say 2022. That was one of those ones that you were upset because they showed the CG trailer and it said 2022. No,
I'm just wondering though, because we're seeing what happened with Cyberpunk. We're in, and essentially Cyberpunk's issues, 80% of their issues are attached to prior gen. Agreed?
Yes.
So who is going to be the first one to go, you know what? It won't work like we want it to. We were hoping to. We understand that we're walking away from a substantial install base. However, it just doesn't work.
I still have in the back of my head, I know Halo Infinite can't, but I still feel like Halo Infinite is the one that's going to hey, we had a drop last gen. I'm going through the list of games right now. But
I know I kind of put you on the spot, but it kind of just dawned on me of where, because now 2022, for Hogwarts, I don't know if they even talked about prior gen. I don't know. But now we're talking, if it comes out in holiday 2022, we're talking 3 years away from the launch of these consoles. Or even 2.5 years. Would PS4 and Xbox One still be a viable platform that way?
I guess in just pure, there's enough homes that have those consoles. That is a good point. Anything that was announced for previous gen coming out in 2022 are probably not going to come out to previous gen because it just doesn't make sense.
Or who does it and just doesn't talk about it. Who just all of a sudden they just hope that in the middle of it okay, we're in June of 2022, do we even have to talk about PS4 and Xbox One anymore, or can we just say this because by then there's X amount of consoles on the market and people are kind of just I'm just using as an
Rainbow
as an
Six
example.
Quarantine, if that ever comes out, we'll just casually just be we'd never announced any consoles for this thing. And then they'll just feel it's just
okay. I know Glorious is in the chat a bunch. Halo wants that free to play money. I think by the time Halo comes out, we're gonna have an xCloud app, and people are gonna be able to play Halo on their television without a console.
Yeah, they'll definitely get that money one way or the other. But also at this point, like if they give one more bad news story about Halo, like it won't be worth it.
But I also feel like their protection is xCloud, to where like I as bad as this sounds, and I hope Microsoft doesn't do this as I say it out loud, but I could see them letting the game run on Xbox One, but it's really running through xCloud.
Yeah, I can see that. That would have to be one of those things where they announce like, hey, we won't have a Xbox One version of this game, but you can play it with our newly launched app on the store on the Xbox, for Xbox Series X or whatever.
I could totally see that.
Yeah, no, that would probably be the way you announce that. Of just like, hey, but don't worry, you're not going to miss out. If you have Xbox Live, you'll get access to xCloud for like a month, so you can play it, and then they'll just microtransaction that game to hell just to make up for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I fully expect us to get some more delays for a lot of these games.
Yeah, and I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing, because I think that all of us were in the same mindset of, all right, let's shut it down for 2 weeks to a month, and it should be better. Let's shut it down for 3 months, 6 months, and now we're 10 months into this, and I think a developer was probably hoping that their people would be in the studios come January, realistically. Yeah. And it's not going to be the case.
The problem is, like, we never had a full shutdown, which is why this lingered. It was all like
but some countries have. I mean,
they did the full shutdowns, and now they're back to normal because they like fully shut things down, and we just never. I would
argue that UK fully shut things down, and we still got the Cyberpunk debacle.
Yeah, that's because of last gen mostly. That's them trying to push.
But I mean, it doesn't sound like very many of the CD Projekt Red people were in the studios either.
Oh yeah, it definitely didn't help. But like other countries that definitely were able to shut down and kind of get to a more normal state than this. The problem with having 50 states is they each can make their own rule, and it kind of just made everything a mess instead of just one country. All right, the next story, this one kind of rumory, but people have always used LinkedIn as a way of finding out what is being worked on. So apparently Sony has been working on a new studio in San Diego, ran by Michael Mumber, who's been with PlayStation for 20 years. He's been updating his LinkedIn profile, and recruiting people to this new San Diego studio. And currently it is said that he's building an all-star team, and they're working on a AAA exclusive for PlayStation, obviously, based on an existing franchise. So this is, of course, got everyone speculating that maybe this is where Uncharted goes. If you want Naughty Dog to work on something new, especially Uncharted's not going anywhere, especially with the movie coming out. Like, you would imagine if the movie's successful that you would want to keep the Uncharted franchise going. Especially, Tom Holland still looks like a baby boy, so maybe you could do young Nathan Drake Uncharted series and have them kind of be similar to
Uncharted, the Nathan Drake Diaries.
yeah, exactly. So this looks like this has been happening for a while. This studio has been building up its talent. This is something you have to take with a grain of salt. Some people did point out that this guy might just be like trolling because he knows people are looking at his profile and he's just adding unnecessary things to it. Because apparently he does link to news articles on his LinkedIn profile that are rumors of like Sony building a super secret studio in San Diego. So he could just be playing into that. But I guess the reason I put this in here, because I guess I didn't think of like, we keep talking about like Sony buying other studios, but they're also really good.
We're just going to make them.
Yeah, no, they're really good at it. I mean, Microsoft's doing the same thing with the Initiative, where they like are taking all this talent for Perfect Dark. But it never crossed my mind really that like, why wouldn't Sony just like grab successful people from their other studios and then put them together, or give them their own studio? Any thoughts on Sony working on a new studio? And that them working on an existing franchise?
It has to be Uncharted, because right now I would argue that that's the most successful franchise that doesn't have a game in development.
Yeah, or that the studio wouldn't be working on a sequel already, because you'd imagine you would give Naughty Dog a break from Uncharted. They told their stories for Uncharted.
I mean, granted, like, Last of Us Part 2 has been out for, over 6 months now, and we know at least at one point in time that Naughty Dog allegedly had 2 teams. Whether that's just still true today or not, like in terms of who works on what and how that ends up happening with crunch and all that stuff, who knows? But what has the smaller group of people at Naughty Dog been working on while the other people finished Last of Us?
Yeah, did they? Because there's no way they went all hands on deck. You would assume that they would still just have like that auxiliary
15,
studio or whatever.
18, whatever. So, when we hear about that, like I don't know. I would assume, like, to your point as well, like that's not Uncharted 5 or Uncharted Lost Legacy 2 as an example. I would not think that. I'm with you. I think Naughty Dog is, has put to bed Uncharted from their studio. Not saying that they wouldn't, help or consult if another Sony studio is working on Uncharted.
Pull a writer or something, or an artist here.
Yeah. Or, be on a couple conferences and going, what are you doing? No, you can't do that. That doesn't work. So, yeah, because we know, like, God of War is obviously, through, Sony San Diego or Sony Santa Monica, excuse me. But, I guess the possibility is that this other studio, the only other thing that comes to mind, and it would still beg the question of what Bend is working on now as well, is that maybe the studio is working on the sequel to Days Gone, because Ben wants to do something different, and it looks like, or appears at least on paper, that Days Gone sold well enough to warrant a sequel. Yeah,
I was gonna say, like, a lot of people talk down about Days Gone, even though it was a really solid game, but it sold really well. For a game that people like talk down to. So I imagine there would be a Days Gone sequel. On what scale, who knows? But
I mean, maybe they're doing Order 1887. I don't know.
They could, yeah. The Fifth Hour or something as like the subtitle. Uncharted is the only thing I can think of that like would make sense for like the studio to be working on, because everything else that's big in Sony is already tied up, unless they bring back Siphon Filter or
Ubisoft owns that.
No, that's Splinter Cell. Siphon Filter is
I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry.
Because they're not going to bring back Twisted Metal. They're not bringing back PlayStation All-Stars. Little Big Planet, they already kind of have Sumo Digital as like their like the person they hire. To hire for Little Big Planet. So like all those sequels.
I mean, the other one that I think would be amazing, but I don't think that it would be to continue the story of Cole through Infamous.
Yeah, I guess Infamous is kind of a forgotten one, just because it's been so long, and Ghost was so successful that you would imagine Sucker Punch could kind of just do whatever they want. I don't know if Ghost really lends itself to sequels, but you can definitely... Because we
didn't really know what the future of Cole as a character in the PlayStation universe was. I mean, he was in PlayStation All-Stars, so I think after Infamous 2 was out and all that's, and he wasn't in... I mean, I haven't finished it, but he wasn't in Second Son.
Referenced, I believe. It's been so long.
Yeah, so that would lead me to believe if there is hope to, I think that it's a good franchise a good character that people may want to know a little bit more about. And also it'd be a great, again, like we've always talked about, like, hey, we're doing Infamous 3, and, now we've remastered Infamous 1 and 2. If you pre-order, you get it on PS5, and be a great way to, like, kind of revitalize that franchise for people that maybe haven't played it. Or it's been over 10 years since you played it, or 7 years since you played it.
Yeah, and those hoping for this to be Killzone related, they killed the Killzone.com website last week, which I failed to mention. RIP Killzone. You don't kill the website and then announce a game for it.
Right. Do you okay? So on paper, this Uncharted movie is supposed to come out this year, correct?
I believe so. Yeah.
Do you see that, like, the studio has maybe been? I know it's like maybe been working on this for a little while. Like, do you see the possibility of them trying to push out an Uncharted Lost Legacy style game by the holiday of this year, like a $40 like continuation story of like the quote unquote Nathan Drake Diaries or young Nathan Drake?
I could totally see that as a possibility, just because Lost Legacy was good. People liked it.
I think the reception behind Lost Legacy and Miles Morales has been very good.
Yeah.
In terms of the 8 to 10 hour story, $40 to $50 game.
And I that would probably be a good idea, especially if you're handing off Uncharted to a new studio. Maybe don't give it to them, be like, make a really good 20 to 30 hour game. You just tell them, like, hey, can you make like a solid 5 to 10 hour game?
Yeah.
And then you can probably then
some side quest open world stuff,
Yeah. And then you can probably peel Neil Druckmann and be like, hey, can you just bang out a script?
Right.
I know that's not how video game scripts work.
Right.
But, you can be like, hey,
can you
Neil,
build the foundation for their story?
Neil, do you have a good idea for us to run with? And then he gives him something. And then you can still have some sort of legacy on it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's actually a good point. If they wanted to, or if they just do this, if this studio just becomes like an artillery studio that works on expansions like that, of just hey, can you do a Lost Legacy game? Oh, hey, can you do a short, God of War game? But that does require a lot of amazing talent to be that flexible. But if they want to make
it does. But it also it's I'm being very facetious when I say this, but it also means if they're gonna do a God of War side story.
Mm.
Tell Sony Santa Monica who you own, upload your assets to OneDrive, give it to the studio, and let's bring those assets in there and let's do something. I mean, because I think a huge, and this is not a dig on it, but a huge time saver for Miles Morales was the world was there.
Yeah. New York was already built. They added new weather.
You made it snow, and you added Miles as a character. Who was already in the game in the first game. So I mean, there was a lot of things that were already there, assets that were already there to allow Insomniac to turn this out at a relatively quick turnaround from the release, within the releasing of 2018 Spider-Man to Miles Morales, So I think that the potential is there.
Oh, for sure. All right, let's move on to the last story. Fuck. Okay, so Cyberpunk 2077 still broken on last-gen consoles. CD Projekt Red had a busy week or so. So they put out a apology video. The head of CD Projekt Red came out and just kind of explained himself in terms of hey, this is what I think went wrong. But it was poorly done. It was definitely one of those things where it's just who thought it was a good idea to put out this video? Because it was one of those things where they did the thing where someone asks you what's your biggest flaw, and you're like, I just care too much type of answer. Their answer to what went wrong was they're too ambitious. The game was too large. You're trying too many new things and couldn't get it together. They explained the timeline thing. They kind of put it out that QA failed in a situation and they missed a lot of bugs that made it out, which is not how QA works at all. There's a thing in QA.
It's also too little too late. You this verbiage, I'm sorry, I just hit my mic. This video that he put out is what you put out when you say we're delaying our game until 2021, until spring of 2021, and here's why. This apology that he wrote in January or released in January is what he should have put out in November, saying, due to these circumstances, Cyberpunk 2077 is not coming out until April or May of 2021, or further out. Because all the Bloomberg reports with Jason Schreier are all saying that the team that was physically working on making this game said 2022.
Yeah, they knew and they were notifying. And then when you get this video, which it's funny, the same guy went back and forth with Jason Schreier and just picked a couple little things in the article that he felt were wrong. But it felt so petty. It's wait, of all the things that he wrote here, you picked out those 3 things?
Right.
Whoa, you're not helping yourself.
Your house is on fire, but you're talking about that rose bush that didn't catch on fire in the front corner of the house.
Yeah. It was such a weird exchange, and Jason Schreier is just hey, if you want to do an interview, we can talk about this over length. Conversation stopped. So he put out this video. There's a roadmap that exists now. And they put out...
So your game is in trouble when you have to release a public roadmap of what you're going to do over the next 4 to 6 months. And yes, I'm speaking of that from the Destiny and a Division fan.
Yeah. So the roadmap is vague. So it's like the map says 2021, 2022, and then it says for the majority of that timeline, multiple updates and improvements. No specific dates.
It's almost as bad as Division years ago saying, we have stuff and things planned.
Yeah. The big thing that came from this is like they'll have free DLC. Because God, if they tried to charge DLC for this game,
I didn't even see that. Okay,
on current gen or last gen,
it was $30. I was like, I saw it on sale for $30. I'm like, I'm gonna wait.
I was gonna say if you can get it digitally for $30, maybe do that, but you can't on PlayStation. It's not on a store. But the free next gen console update isn't coming into the second half of this year. So that's a huge delay as opposed to before it was like supposed to be like Q1, Q2. So this is kind of this doesn't make them look good. I feel bad for the actual developers that like worked on this game because their CEO is not helping their image at all by putting out this video. I totally see the mentality of like, hey, I'm just going to be super honest, but I don't feel like
you're
the
telling
video
people almost what they already know.
Yeah, and too late, like you said, it was just too late for some of this stuff. So it was just like, okay, you're being honest with some caveats, but it's too late for this thing.
Well, it did exactly what he wanted it to do, though. The shares of their company went back up the next day.
Yeah, because investors like this sort of like kinda honest take, even though the reporting around it says that this wasn't the most honest take.
Yeah.
But it did make promises that now they have to keep with.
Yeah.
Though they were very strategic of just like, yeah, there'll be free DLC and multiple updates this year, whatever that means. And then, moving the next gen to the second half of the year is, there as
they
well.
They damn sure better not bring out this multiplayer until the single player is fixed.
I don't think I have a feeling, especially because the shooting's not good in this game. So the idea of them putting a multiplayer out is just crazy to me.
Do you think there's any? I know there's been some batting back and forth. Do you think there's any credence to because you and I saw this demo, we saw it being played in a room. Granted, I was distracted for half of it during the presentation, but
yeah.
Do you think this Cyberpunk demo at E3 was fake?
I don't think it was. See, fake is such a weird word. Like, I wish in the reporting that Schreier put out, he used a different word than fake.
Because we know that there are things that are built strictly for press or for E3 presentation.
Every demo that you play at E3. I don't think it was a vertical slice of the game. I mean, definitely it was implemented into the game. But it's hard to say for E3 demos. Those are made specifically for that.
Yeah, because when Naughty Dog releases an Uncharted 2 trailer / playable demo that you don't see in the game, is that fake?
Yeah.
Because you didn't see it in the game? The answer to that obviously is no. We've seen, what was it, Uncharted 4 when they were playing it and the dude fell through the floor and people were actually like, that was more validity, that was more validation for that demo because there's obviously somebody was really playing it because they bugged out in the game. Like, yeah. But,
So, like again, I think Jason Schreier used poor wording when he called like the E3 demo fake, and he should know that when you use fake. Demos are usually made specifically for that event. In the case of Cyberpunk, they definitely weren't demoing that on console. They had a souped up PC,
right. Which we saw
doing that. Yeah, which we saw. And
that wasn't hidden. I feel like at the beginning of the presentation that there was a young lady that explained almost everything to us, what was happening, and like you saw this like thing that wouldn't even fit on my desk that they were playing the game on.
Yeah. So it was on a PC, which we know the PC version of this game is good in terms of like it isn't as broken as the console port. So it's one of those things where like I don't think the demo is fake, but it was definitely a highly polished demo. because that's what you do at these conventions. It is definitely going to make, if E3 ever happens again, Gamescom is probably more likely to happen before E3 based on how everything's going. There might need to be more openness in terms of like what people see at E3 or how it's reported what they saw, because I've definitely been burned at E3, where you see a demo and it either looks really good and the game turns out bad, or the demo's bad, but they're like, no, but this is like pre-alpha, don't worry, this is not how the game's going to look. And then you see the game and you're just like, shit, that totally was not pre-alpha, that was final build. So if anything, the legacy of Cyberpunk is going to be what we talked about earlier with like announcing games and delaying, and then also like how media will report from the live demos that they get at these conventions, especially if they don't get hands-on.
Well, and then the thing that I don't know how to word this correctly, and maybe it's just because of the multiple years of the business that I've been working for, like making a living from as retail. Everybody's like, well, the company was more worried about selling copies of the game and marketing of their game than making sure it was right. Well, yeah, duh. Like, even if the game is great and nobody's heard of it, it doesn't matter. Like, marketing has to be there. Like, everybody's like, well, maybe they didn't spend so much time getting Keanu Reeves. Well, because they got Keanu Reeves, they sold 13 million copies of a broken game. Like,
it
that
definitely
played a factor
helps
into it. We've seen so many games that we wish people would. I really wish people would play this game. And you talk about your game of the year or like one of your top 5 games, and somebody's like, I've never even heard of that. You tweeted out earlier in this week of like your next game might be the Pathless. I've been looking at the Pathless. Other people don't even know what that game is, and that game has some potential. It looks like to be really, really cool. And is it because the game is developed bad, or the game is no? It's because it's marketed bad.
Yeah, and this is and speaking with Cyberpunk specifically, this is what happens when the PR team's not in charge. Like, all the messaging post-release that this company's been dealing with, I feel like is an extension of bad marketing. Like, they knew how to market the sell of the game, but they do not know how to market an apology. And they're just burying themselves a hole. And shortly after this, like a second class action lawsuit from investors went out. Because like every time they talk, it just turns into more holes for, investors to punch holes in. And then
this is also why we have Far Cry 6 and not Cyberpunk 2077. Like, and I'm, like, people are like, I want them to, and I'm the same way. I want new and innovative things. Statistically, they don't sell.
Yeah, and you usually have to hit it out of the ballpark. Like,
why is everybody clamoring for a Star Wars game? Because they've got a really cool video game idea, and it's just is going to sell better if it's Star Wars such and such. It's just gonna sell better.
Well, and you mentioned a multiplayer earlier. Like, how the fuck do they market Cyberpunk 2077 multiplayer after all this happened? How do they come out? Like, the next game from CD Projekt Red will probably be a Witcher game. Yep. They can't announce it and then release it 7 years later. Like, they need to like stay quiet and then release it within a reasonable time frame. And then also, so I know you're not too familiar with like the CD Projekt Red, but Cyberpunk 2, or not Cyberpunk 2, Witcher 2 released kind of broken, and they needed to fix it and patch it. It was on PC. Yeah. Witcher 3 also went through that, where it wasn't broken, but they needed to like completely change how it played.
Needs some quality of life polish.
Yeah.
So.
But it didn't also have a good launch. And then this just like is like a snowball effect of like, okay, 2 was a little broken, they fixed it. 3 was, a little broken and they fixed it. And then Cyberpunk is like, it's trash fire, and they hopefully can fix it. Now, CD Projekt Red, when they make their next game, they have to like figure out like how to reintroduce themselves, which will probably be The Witcher.
Yeah, it sucks, but like I agree with you. Like, CD Projekt Red like needs to get Cyberpunk to the point of where it's sustainable at this point, and then they just need to go away. Like, how long until like whatever it was, September or October, when DC did their DC Con thing, like we were like, what is Rocksteady doing? Where's Rocksteady? What are they doing? They haven't spoken, and it was what, 5 years?
something like that.
And they were just like, are they still in business? Like, we don't know. Like, we know that they're, and they were just quiet. And then they're like, okay, here's 2 of the things that we're working on, or the one thing that we're working on. And then the Montreal
and then they
studio
disappeared again.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, we're working on Suicide Squad, and then they faded to the background.
So,
and then,
they're not, releasing, and it's, it's good. And Sony's kind of done the same thing, like, for a long time. Like, we didn't know what Sony Bend was doing. And then they came out and said, here's what we're doing. They released what they were doing, and then they went away. So, and it's like, okay, so get Cyberpunk to a sustainable thing. You're not a game as a service. Go away. Put your nose to the grindstone. Make your next game. Don't talk about it till it's ready. Don't put something at your trailer. Don't put something on your trailer in 2015 or 2016 or whatever year it was that said it'll come out when it's ready, because you look dumb now because it wasn't ready.
Yeah.
Don't say there's any more delays and then delay it 3 times.
Yeah, at that point, it's just like they need to have marketing basically take over for them at that point. Like, have the PR company handle
it sucks. Like,
messaging.
you and I have both seen this, where we ask a really good question to a developer or to somebody. Like, it's happened to me, and I always use Destiny as an example. Whether you like it, I'm sorry if you don't like it, whatever. But where I ask, like, I can still remember to this day, like a pre-recorded interview, I asked Deej a good question, or I asked the developer a great question. He actually wants to answer the question, and then PR gets right in my face. Nope, sorry, we're not talking about that.
That is super frustrating on our side, but that also is a much needed thing for like developers.
And that was back when
publishers.
Activision was dealing with the publishment of Destiny, and they're just like, nope. Like, this is not like, this is not happening. Like,
but
and,
he could have told you something.
I would have a conversation, over a beer or over, a sandwich or something like that, where we would have a conversation about things. Like, there, most of you that are listening to the show know my love of Destiny, where I would, at a roundtable discussion, I would ask a question. And, these guys are going through these roundtable discussions all the time. The developers are literally rolling their eyes in the back of their head with 90% of the questions that are being asked of them. Then you ask them a legitimate question that they want to answer. They sit up in their seat and they can't answer it, because they're like, what?
Well, because they might say something that is like a feature that is not ready or might get killed, or they'll tell you, oh, it's a trash fire right now. We don't know how we're going to ship the game, sort of thing.
But then we're off, having, like, in between play sessions, and the guy comes up to me and starts talking to me like, hey, can you explain to me more what you were talking about there? It's like,
yeah. It's like, hey, we can't answer your meat and potatoes like, we can't answer, like, your very specific question, because the only questions we're supposed to answer is there multiplayer. Like, it's one of those weird things that I miss.
Ubisoft does it too. I don't want to just, Ubisoft does it as well. Of, like, I can remember going to Division play sessions of getting to check things out, whether it was 1 or 2 or the beginning of 2, and we'd be eating and the developers would be there, and we'd be having a conversation amongst 3 or 4 people. PR would be there, and I would, myself or somebody else would say something, and it would start a conversation, and, like, the PR guy would bump the developer and be like, are you listening to these guys? Like, these are who play your game, and they're saying that this stuff is bothering them, like, and they're like.
And that's why when I would go to E3s, I would love talking to the indie people, because they would usually like, should I tell you this? I'm like, maybe, and they're like, fuck it, let me just tell you this. Or like when I like would have meetings at the Devolver, and the developer's like, can I tell them about this? And then the Devolver rep would be like, I don't give a shit. And then they would just tell you stuff. But I think that's all going to change now for, like, AAA games at E3 with how they handle any of this messaging and just everything that went with Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk now is going to be, like, a really interesting book, and also a Bible for, like, future AAA game developments.
It's going to be Jason Schreier's 3rd book, The Development of Cyberpunk 2077.
Yeah, no, and then other AAA developers are going to, like, treat, like, what went wrong with Cyberpunk as, like, their roadmap of terms of, like, what to avoid.
We need to hire somebody from CD Projekt Red just so we don't do what they did. Like, that guy's job is to sit in the room and go, no, don't do that. Like,
it'd be the opposite. It would be like they developers are going to have bracelets at what would CD Projekt Red do, and they would just have to work the opposite of what CD Projekt Red would do.
Although we've seen multiple studios see other studios fall flat on their faces and then just proceed to follow them off the cliff as well.
Oh yeah, no, we see that all the time, but also sometimes it's like, oh, the train's already on the tracks, it's already moving real fast, there's no time to stop, which is also a constant problem in game development. But that's it for news. All
right, I must say, I think we beat that horse a little bit. So, what we're playing and watching, I'll go first. Mine's brief. So, I told you guys last week that I bought Owen his own Switch. 50% of the reason for that was so I could actually play the Switch. So I was actually able to play Hades. I think I played 5 or 6 rotations on it. I guess, is that a word? Like playthroughs?
Yes.
I don't think that I've escaped, if that's what I'm going for. I've died, I've gotten keys or gotten points or gotten upgrades or gotten gifts and are going through those and still learning those. There is a delicate balance between games being hold your hand and not holding your hand at all. Hades is on the side of we're not going to hold your hand at all. In terms of like how does this function? How does this work exactly? But I see the appeal of it. It hasn't really hooked me yet, and I think it. Excuse me. I think it can potentially hook me. I just think I've got to get a little bit more comfortable with the gameplay.
Are you still using the base weapon, or did you? Because the bow and arrow.
I've changed a couple, to the bow and the split bow, and I definitely see the appeal of like, oh, okay, one more run and then you get like 2 rooms farther or 4 rooms farther, and it kind of does that cool thing where when you go in the room and the guy goes, I haven't been here before. I'm like, oh, I got farther, cool. So it's definitely fun. I just dabbled with it just a little bit. Roguelikes and rogues aren't anything that really ever grabs me, but it's definitely a genre that I would like to check out. I definitely see the let me play for 10 or 15 minutes and stop function of this. I haven't played it in handheld mode. I was playing it with the Pro Controller, which is the preferred way that I like to play on the Switch, but I do have those hoary grips that are bigger that I could use as well if needed. But now that he's off playing his own Switch, I can play. We yesterday, because good old Wario 64 with the price error through Walmart, I got the Captain Toad treasure tracker and all the DLC for like $4.24. They were supposedly just selling the DLC as on a sale, but it turned out the game code was for the full game. So it's definitely something that I enjoy. Again, it's another bite-sized thing that you can just play for a little bit. It's also something that Angela can play, so that's a win. And that's just a basic puzzle solid game that's just fun to play in small increments of time. Ubisoft was nice enough to send one to you, and then they also sent one to me. They sent me Scott Pilgrim on the Switch, and I played like a level or 2 of that. It looks good. I need to mess with. I think I don't know if it's just coming off of overnights or if it's just a matter of like the large variety of games that I'm trying to play, or the settings on my TV, or I just have eye fatigue. Like there's something like seriously going on. Like I was having a hard time watching a football game the other day, like just like a playoff game, and I'm just like I have to really really dig into the settings on my TV and I don't know if I got new glasses, and I don't think my glasses have anything to do with it, but I got new glasses and I came off of like 5 nights of overnights, and I just had a long like 2 weeks, but
seems like you're having problems with bright games.
Yeah.
Like, in general.
Yeah, so I've got to figure out like a lot of the brightness settings on my TV on almost all the default settings are at 100, and like that's even when I change settings, they're still at 100. So I really just need to dig into finding some of that stuff out. I did go to that RTing thing that you suggested, but I didn't really see anything that was like set this for gaming and set this for movie watching. But I also didn't dig very deep. So yeah. And then I just wanted to briefly touch on it because a lot of people do ask about it, and you've even mentioned it as well. I am still playing Destiny in smaller increments. The season ends in like 3 weeks. They released some stuff today around like some of the exotic guns that they brought out. But the state of Destiny at its current standing is a little rough, which I fully expected it to be rough. I think I even talked about it before Beyond Light came out that it was going to be rough. The sunsetting that they've done of weapons has really made the loot pool very limited in terms of what's viable and what you can use and level up. They did that because there was issues with older weapons just overshadowing everything else in the game, and they were really trying to, those weapons were causing them problems. The main issue that they're having now is, like, last week they just announced an update of they are reintroducing some guns to the game and unsunsetting these guns on the Moon and on Dreaming City, which are both destinations that were attached to the Shadowkeep campaign and to the Forsaken campaign. Ironically enough, both of those things, in order for you to access those pieces of content, you still have to pay for them. They're not part of the free-to-play package. And until this next season thing that they just announced last week, you were purchasing Shadowkeep or purchasing Forsaken, or both. You were paying money for them, and you were playing the content, and you were getting rewards that weren't relevant. So I think that that's part of the problem, and that's why that this is their way of trying to, like, quote unquote fix this issue. But what it looks like they're doing is, it looks like on the surface of, like, we don't have enough weapons in the game for you to use, so we're bringing older stuff back, reintroducing it with newer perks. So there's a really bad, like, messaging going on right here with their lack of loot incentive, lack of, grind incentive, which doesn't really bother me at this current point in time, because it lets me kind of dabble with Destiny and then dabble with other games and not feel like I'm, like, behind. But it's definitely caused some issues for some of the, the more dedicated players and the hardcore players, which I don't consider myself anymore. I haven't cleared this raid. That's been out for like 2 months, which is a relatively long time for me. It's just not something that I've made a huge priority, even though that the loot from there is probably some of the best in the game in a long time. But there is definitely, the game does have some challenges and some things that it has to figure out, and hopefully they can figure it out with the next season. But right now, the only reason I booted up and played Destiny today was because there was a new thing to do, like a new story mission. And it's kind of ironic that the game has gotten to that point where Destiny 1's story was trash, but the gameplay was king, and the loot incentive and the gameplay loop was king, and Destiny 2's stories are really, really good, but the gameplay loop and the loot incentive are crap. Yeah. So which is better? It's like, it's to each their own, I guess, with that one. So there is, that aspect to it. But it'll be interesting to see. I'm also going to be in the middle of, in the next 2 to 3 weeks, when I get my new gaming monitor. I know you guys have been clamoring for Michael or myself to stream. I put a picture up in the Facebook group and stuff. I'm getting ready to redo my office to I guess do a little bit of sound management, do a little bit of storage control, and some changes to hopefully be able to do some future content, use the space a little bit better, show off some stuff, do some better unboxings. But that'll be kind of a project that I'm working on. I got a bunch of like fixturing and stuff from my store, from a bunch of remodels that I was doing. I did pay for it. But that'll be something that I will probably do some before and after pictures of a little bit. I don't know how much of this mess of an office I'm going to show you guys. And I'll do like a room tour. So if you have any suggestions or anything that you guys would like to see in terms of like collectibles or paraphernalias, please let me know. I don't have as much as people think I do, but it'll still be a fun thing to clean up and use and organize. So I also watched WandaVision, both episodes.
Yep. I really loved it.
I enjoyed it. I am not as deep into the Marvel MCU as you are. But I did watch a couple YouTube videos afterwards, kind of explaining a little bit more of what could be going on and the potential of what the foundation that they're building for in the future. I am super fascinated by both two aspects of this. They talked about the neighbor a lot, and her name is skipping me right now.
Yeah.
But the brooch that she was wearing, they tied it to a different character in the comic books, and she also had the same like pin on in a different scene when she was outside. So the part that fascinates me the most about those things is the first part is the writers in the room going and working with the fashion people going, you can put her in whatever clothing you want that you think fits that genre. This has to be on her. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
And then the people that are involved in enough and know enough about the comic books to sit there and see something like an Easter egg like that And to be able to do a 15 or 20 minute YouTube video on it is fascinating to me.
Just in the credits of the second episode, there was like a bunch
names,
of Easter eggs.
Like it was just like, and seeing what they're what they're messing with the different what appears to be like different decades as the the colors kind of mingling around. I don't want to
as they
speak
move
too
through
generally.
time and everything.
So it's really, really cool. Like I think I tweeted out and Facebooked out like, I don't know what I just saw, but I can't wait till next week. Like, so but I didn't realize it'd been like 500 days since we had any new Marvel content. Like,
I think dude, just it's funny though, like me and Sarah were watching it, and when I saw the Marvel roll, like that whatever that opening Marvel
the B-roll
thing is, when I just saw that, I'm like, holy shit, it's been so long since I've heard that sound or like seen that little opening credits thing. But I really loved it. Like I'm picking up on like Easter eggs, but like they're going deep to where even I'm like, I think that's a reference to something. And then I check.
Yeah, this even like the boss being like a villain in the comic books. I'm like, huh?
They're going over my head on some of this stuff.
Wow, I was just like, I fell down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I see a lot of people that are on the camp of like, I want to binge this, and they should just let me binge it. Well, first of all, from a marketing standpoint, it's over 8 or 9 episodes, so that's a guaranteed 2 months of subscriptions that Disney Plus gets from you, even if you only get it for WandaVision. 2, for me, I think that if they released all 8 or 9 episodes, I would wanted to keep watching it, but I think I would have gotten more and more and more confused as I went through the episodes.
I would love 2 episodes a week.
Yeah,
like that would make me happy. I was so sad going through 2 episodes and be like, I want more. But that's
are you concerned about like WandaVision or Mandalorian's length? Sometimes only being like 31 or 34 minutes.
So I think it works better for WandaVision because they're copying sitcoms. So them hitting like a 22-minute mark or, like for a sitcom length wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Mandalorian, it definitely bothers me because sometimes it's just like, oh, this one's 28 minutes and it's like, this next one's 45 minutes. And then a good chunk of that is like that like super extra long closing credits for Mandalorian. So it bothers me more with Mandalorian than it does like WandaVision, just because WandaVision has a theme. When they get to Winter Soldier and Falcon, that's gonna bother me when they're like under 30-minute episodes, because I feel like for whatever they do for that I want like the standard 40 minutes to an hour per episode. Yeah. But WandaVision, I think it works just because it's just the length of it and what they're trying to do with like each episode is interesting. The first episode was Dick Van Dyke, and then the second episode was Bewitched. Like that stuff is cool in a half-hour format, but I don't know if I'd want like an hour-long episode of them copying the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Yeah, I agree. I was just more wondering, like, it didn't really bother me, but then, like, it's, like, like, in my mind, I'm like, oh, it's Friday, like, I work, and I'm like, oh, I can get home and eat dinner, and we can watch WandaVision, and you get home at, like, 6, you eat dinner, it's 6:45, 7 o'clock, you sit down, you turn WandaVision on, you play it, 7:32, you're done, like, oh.
That happened to me, that totally happened to us on Friday, like, I don't even think we finished eating our food, and the first episode was, like, was done.
But I hope, like, it looks like these plans that Disney Plus has, like, there's some really cool stuff, it's just, hopefully you can just come a little sooner. But all right, playing and watching for you, I think we might have an interesting conversation about what you watched.
Yeah, potentially. So Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the game, was the primary thing that I played this week. There's not much to say about this. The game originally came out in 2010. It's based on the comics, though Universal owns the rights to the movies and I guess the game. It was delisted from the store just because it's like licensing hell, because it's like a game based on books that is also partly owned by the people that make the movies, and also a soundtrack that's made by a very popular chiptune band. This sounds like it was a licensing nightmare, so Ubisoft just delisted it as opposed to renegotiating to keep this up forever. So this is a basic re-release port of that game, including all of its DLC and its online component. So you have local co-op, online co-op, and then obviously the single player with a bunch of different other modes that either were there day one in 2010 or added as DLC later on. So this is a beat 'em up with soundtrack by Anamanaguchi. I think the soundtrack is like the champion of this like game. The soundtrack is fantastic. It's one of the best video game soundtracks ever. It is a beat 'em up, so gameplay is important, but they didn't overcomplicate things with Scott Pilgrim. They kind of kept it really simple.
I would agree.
Maybe too simple if you're looking for something more, but that's when the soundtrack keeps you playing, or your love of the Scott Pilgrim franchise. Because especially for me, I mean, Scott Pilgrim has been my freaking avatar on Twitter for like probably like since 2008, since Twitter was invented. So I'm a big Scott Pilgrim fan. So what I love from this isn't necessarily the gameplay, but it's the use of all the characters, all the background art, all the little Easter eggs from the books, because this pulls more from the books than it does the movies. All of that, the art transitions really well. It's really close to the art that you got in the graphic novels. So the gameplay is rather simple, which if you're looking for a deeper beat 'em up, there are better beat 'em ups out there. But if you're looking for a fun, vibrant color thing with an amazing soundtrack, Scott Pilgrim is there for you. And then if you happen to like the movies or the graphic novels, this is exactly what you would want, is a retro beat 'em up based on how everything goes in the books and the movies. Absolutely love it. There's definitely replayability there, especially if you're going to hop online and you're going to do local co-op or leveling up the multiple characters that are playable. Really love this. It's funny, I ended up spending like over $200 on the limited runs collector's edition stuff that they put on. So I'm a huge Scott Pilgrim fan. This is worth playing. I'm just glad that I get to have it again after it was delisted. Though technically I still had it on my PS3, but I retired that, several years ago. So now I at least have it accessible on my PS4 and PS5, because it's definitely one of those games where over the years I would think about it like, oh, that'd be fun to play it again. So just being able to easily access it is huge for me. So definitely worth trying. And if you've never played the game and all you have interacted with Scott Pilgrim is the movies, the game's worth playing. It's
or not at all for me, and it was just fun to kind of just mess around with a beat 'em up game. Like I got a little bit of like Double Dragon vibes from it when I was playing it.
Oh, for sure, yeah. It definitely has that.
And it's only $15. Like,
yeah.
So I was like, when I saw that on the store, I was like, huh, because that was definitely like game. I almost feel like that's a great value, and like I could definitely see this being this could have easily been a $25-$30 game,
especially with the soundtrack
and all
being
the stuff
really,
in it.
really
Yeah,
good.
like all the the complete edition. So I know a couple people on the Facebook group were already talking about it. They had it, so it's $14.99. Like it's okay to play a brightly colored sprite game that doesn't have massive storylines of or complex gameplay in it. It's refreshing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a game that anyone can play. The only thing I noticed, though, is I feel like the sound effects were really muted for some reason compared to the music, but the music's so good I don't really care. That's like the only flaw I can find with it. And because it was delisted before, don't be surprised if this gets delisted again in a couple years. So I don't know what the window is for playing this, but definitely probably pick it up sooner rather than later. I think it was on the store previously for like 4 years before it got delisted, because again it's probably a licensing nightmare, because there's like the book publisher, the author, Ubisoft, Universal, and then I'm sure Anamanaguchi has some sort of like connection in terms of like the rights to those songs, because some of them were made from the game and some of them are just Anamanaguchi songs. So definitely pick this up sooner rather than later. And I think the movie's on Netflix, so you should watch the movie sometime. So the only other game that I played was I started Titanfall 2. Played about like 2 hours of it. I understand the campaign's like 4 hours long, maybe 5 hours. So finally playing that.
I'm assuming via Game Pass, right?
No. I had it because it was a PS Plus game, so I'm playing it on the PS5. So I see why everyone loved it. The gameplay is top notch. The traversal is like really fun. the only thing that I found kind of jarring, or not even jarring, just kind of funny, is like, since I'm playing this several years after Apex came out, it's a scene like all the things that they tweaked to get to Apex is kind of interesting and fascinating for me, because Apex is in the same universe, it's the same studio. So just seeing how this game plays and being like, okay, and then they changed this to make it better in Apex, and just seeing how like Respawn evolved from Titanfall to Apex is kind of fascinating to me. But like they were able to make a game that like is fun both inside and outside the mech, which I feel like a lot of games that try and have like a mech suit or something like that, usually you're bored when you're not inside the big monster robot machine. And this game is fun both in and out of the mech, which I think is like a really hard thing to do. I did see people are still playing this online apparently, so I might hop into some multiplayer to try that out. But I'll probably end up finishing that tonight, since I guess I'm halfway through, because it's only like a 4 to 5 hour game. So probably give full thoughts on that if anyone cares about my thoughts on a really old game. And really old, it's a couple years old. Other than that, I've been playing Grindstone, and then I dusted off Tetris 99 just because I needed something to do on my Switch. I don't know why. I was just like, I kind of want to go back to Hades, but I've beaten that game I think like 20 something times now, and I think I'm hitting the end of like, I don't think there's much story bits coming, because I think I did my last 2 runs, I barely got any new story bits out of it. So I'm just like, okay, I officially have probably hit my story cap, which technically the main story gets completed after your 10th time finishing it, but there's extra stuff you can learn. So I think I finally hit that ceiling.
I gotta beat it once.
Wall. Yeah. So that's it for playing. And then watching, the only one that Dave wants to hear about, and since we already talked about WandaVision, is I watched the Ready Player One movie.
Okay, so wait. Have you read or listened to the book?
So I've tried reading the book, and I did not like the book.
Okay, so you haven't finished the book.
Yeah, I just didn't like the writing style of the book. I think I was like 4 chapters in, and I just couldn't get into the writing style, which happens with books.
Yeah.
I just felt like in the book, it was trying too hard to pander to be like, hey, you remember this, remember that? And it like leaned in, used that stuff as a crutch. Oh my God. So like, I dislike the book. People like the book, whatever. I absolutely fucking hated this movie. I was genuinely upset at how bad the story and dialogue was. And then the fact that Steven Spielberg directed this, just like, oh my God.
So I don't love the movie. I don't hate the movie, but I don't love the movie. In the book, I understand. My wife kind of said the same thing, where it's almost like he's too, like Ernest Cline is almost too detailed in the book. I can see that. Without referencing the book myself, I do remember like the first third of the book, maybe even like 40% of the book, is a lot of setup of explaining, essentially explaining to you what the Oasis is, how it works, and what's going on in the world, which is needed when you're building a new thing. And like maybe not as in detailed. The story arc does get tremendously better in the book, and the story arc is tremendously better in the book than it is in the movie, like way better.
And I couldn't get over just using pop culture as a crutch. So like, even if it gets better, but I was like, this was definitely one of those movies that I thought the writing was bad, the dialogue was bad, the direction was bad. Like, I don't know how Steven Spielberg, like, I hope he makes another movie after this, just so this isn't one of the last movies he's made. Like, it genuinely bothered me to where I'm just like, fuck, I'm gonna have to make myself feel better, I'm gonna have to watch like a depressing Steven Spielberg movie just so I can be reminded that he's a good director. I don't know, it just, this movie didn't hack my heart, or whatever the fuck that terrible line is that this movie tried to do. I don't know. Just like, if the core of your movie is referencing better movies, you can fuck right off. Like, that's
there is still a really good versus evil story in this book. it is not.
Yeah,
it is
it's
not
not in the
portrayed.
movie.
It is not portrayed well in the movie at all. Like just like as a caveat, like I don't know. And the two main characters, Wade and Sam, they don't meet in the book until like at the end. Like they don't meet in real life until like the last end of the book, and then like within the first like 20 minutes of the movie, like they know who each other are. Like,
yeah, I don't know. I just have real problems when like the antagonist and a protagonist meet in the movie, and I don't give a shit. I'm spoiling. And to tell the protagonist that the antagonist is cool, he's like, "Oh, I like John Hughes movies." It's like, fuck off. And then he's just referencing movies, and then the guy's like, "You're not." When the fucking main character says to the main antagonist, "Even a fanboy can tell you're a hater," or some weird stupid line like that, I'm just like, fuck.
And then that type of dialogue or interaction was not in the book.
But like Ernest Cline had his name on this, I think, as a writer as well. And Zach Penn and Ernest Cline just and then they fucking do Iron Giant wrong. They fucking have Serenity there. Like everything about this movie. And one thing I don't understand, I get it because Ernest Cline is like a big dork who like grew up in the 80s, so it makes sense all of his references would be the 80s. But to me, I can't get over the timeline that these people that are like 20 years or younger in 2045,
right? Because again, it was explained poorly in the movie. Versus,
it's because the guy who created everything grew up in the 80s, so everything he references in the 80s. Yes. So if you're a fanboy, all you're gonna do is watch movies from the 80s. I get that, but like,
well, no, they just did a terrible job of explaining the egg hunt, like because people were invested in Holiday because all of the clues in his egg hunt were based on his life, and he, and when he was building the Oasis, and then what happened. So.
I half the time the movie now, like within like 20 minutes into the movie, it just turned into me and Sarah being like, all right, what other franchise are they going to bastardize in this thing? And it's like,
well, and that was the concern about when the movie was being made, because like obviously Ernest Cline can essentially write whatever he wants in a book, but when you start putting it on television. Or in a movie, there's licensing things that have to go into play.
Okay, here's something. In the book, the first fucking key.
It's not a race.
It's not a race. He doesn't have to go backwards, right?
No.
Okay. That pissed me off so much, because anyone that's ever played a racing game has gone backwards on the track. So the gist
in the book, the gist of like, and again, this is where it was poorly explained in the movie, is in the book, the ability to get the first key was put on the educational planets of Oasis that every single person that accessed the Oasis had access to, and then getting the key allowed, once you got the key, like you're obviously your leveling went way up because you earned something that was like tremendous amount of XP, and you were awarded a bunch of materials in the world for you to be able to start exploring the world. So Wade in the book was a 17-year-old or a teenager, a high school kid that was using like bare minimum equipment to access the Oasis, and he was able to discover the key to then he was able to slowly rise up. Like the video of him, or the scene in the movie of him just going into the store going, yep. Like that's not how that was working. Like he was, like it's just, and I get it. You had to take a 15, I think the audiobook is like 15 or 16 hours. Like
I own the audiobook. I tried reading the book. I
know your commute isn't as much as it used to be, but, the audiobook is good, and granted this is coming from a person that's had to drive multiple times 6 hours different directions, so like
I don't know, man. Like I tried reading the book and I was just like, this isn't a good book, but I don't know, I didn't like the book. Going into the movie, I was like, maybe it'll have cool action, but it was like worse than Michael Bay action. Like how the fuck did the person who made Jurassic Park make this?
And the funny part is the stuff that you and my wife are referencing about the issues you had with the first book. I don't know if I was just like, that was like, to be honest with you, like years ago, that was like the first book that I read like since I graduated from high school. And I read it like on my iPad or something at the time, like when we were on vacation. And then I was listening to the audiobook when we were traveling a lot, just because I did enjoy it. the problems and stuff that you guys are pointing at to are the same ones that I feel are in the second book. So I just don't know if I was just kind of riding the wave of like enjoying what was there.
Fucking title for the second book. Jesus Christ.
Oh, don't worry. It'll be a movie like in 2 years and you can hate on it later.
No, this one failed bad, I think, but it got a 72 on Metacritic.
There's already Ready Player 2 is already in movie development.
Fuck. Are they going to get some other great director to go make this?
I don't know. So.
They'll get Robert Zemeckis to like try his hand on it. Maybe it'll be better. The guy who directed Saving... That would be perfect because the fucking action was shitty like a Michael Bay movie. The man who directed Saving Private Ryan and Schindler's List directed this movie. How is that possible? Fuck. This was terrible. And TJ Miller as the goon villain was bad. The dialogue... Oh my God. Fuck. Let's move on.
All right, so questions and comments that you guys send us using hashtag AskDigitalDays, or in this instance, just post a question in the Twitch chat. Dave from Philly on Twitter, do you guys have any early thoughts on Returnal? After watching a few PlayStation YouTube videos on it, I'm excited to see how Housemarque does with this game. I haven't seen anything on it, and I actually meant to look at something before we recorded, and I forgot to, so...
So from what we've seen,
it's a roguelike, supposedly.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
It is. I'm sorry.
It looks interesting. I still worry that Housemarque is punching above their weight class. Just because I feel like this is the most dramatic game-to-game jump that we've seen from a developer. But I guess Sony's
maybe
backing
going
them.
from third person to first person.
But even then, like, you know, like if you're doing AAA first person and you go AAA third person, it's probably not that crazy of a jump. But them going from like a Resogun, or I forgot what the other one after Resogun, Alien Nation, I think. Going from that to a third person AAA game.
Dead Nation.
Or would, yeah. Is a big jump that concerns me, and Housemarque's a really talented studio, so I hope it works out for them. I'll definitely be interested in picking it up day one, just because I like Housemarque games, and I'm interested to see if they can pull this off. Because if they pull this off, Housemarque's one of those studios I just assume Sony would purchase one day. If this works out for them, they probably will get the financial stability that they need, that they were worried about a couple years ago. So I'm interested in it. Hopefully it works out for them. I still think it's a terrible name. But I guess I would probably never get over the name, and I'll just call it something else.
That roguelike that I play. So, I mean, we were talking about marketing with Cyberpunk. Hopefully, like we mentioned, I think a last episode or 2 episodes ago, like there needs to be a state of play that kind of shows a little bit more of this. We're talking about a game that's coming out in 2 months, almost exactly 2 months from today. So they definitely need to do some stuff with it, especially if, you're going to sit there and say, from the makers of Resogun, like I think that you're, if they're going to pump that kind of accolades into it, I don't know if they are or they aren't. I think people that enjoyed Resogun are going to be like, oh yeah, and then they're going to play this and be like, whoa. Yeah. So I think there needs to be some some better marketing behind it, and maybe again kind of explaining what it is, and typically Sony doesn't do that, so we'll have to see. But right now there's nothing that I've seen, and again, full disclosure, I haven't dug into it, that looks like it might be something that would interest me or not, and that could change. So I'm kind of hoping that they make it a PS Plus game for the PS5 that month, for March. Like, I think that would help, but that also if it was coming out earlier in March, I would agree with you.
Yeah, that's true. Though they have put like random games on Plus. It's rare though. Yeah.
It would have to be like in addition to, or I guess at this point in time, I think if it is the PS5 game on Plus, people might be okay with it being their March game and just having to wait till the 19th for it. But yeah. So the next question from Stefan: does anyone have a spreadsheet of all their games categories by platform? No. Then within the spreadsheet, they work out what games they will play in order what they will be played, or is it just me and I'm weird? No, I think you could probably just have a nice little conversation with Josh Langford, But
he does, but he has a crazy amount of collection.
Yeah.
So.
But no, I don't. I can barely remember to look at the agenda like 5 minutes before we record the show, let alone remember to log a game on a spreadsheet.
Yeah. I definitely used to have a spreadsheet of the games I owned back when I would just buy random games, because that's how that's how I ended up with 3 copies of Resistance Fall of Man, is because I forgot that I already had them and I saw them cheap at like a used video game store. But I haven't updated that spreadsheet in forever. But I never used it for like, what am I going to play? It was mostly of just like, do not buy the same game twice sort of scenario. But no, usually like now I just keep my games, like when I have to look to see if I own a PlayStation game, I just check my trophy list. Because most of the time I usually have launched the game once if I own it. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how I use to track my like PS4, PS5 collection, is just by looking at my trophy list.
Nice. All right, and then the question that it was posted on our Twitch chat today from DarkSage9117. In the industry today, The Witcher 3 is often the quote gold standard in how to make a game and how to revolutionize the industry. However, I remember when Mass Effect 2 was praised and looked at as the gold standard in gaming. My question is, which game has a bigger impact on the gaming industry as a whole, Mass Effect 2 or The Witcher 3? I think having messed with a little bit of Mass Effect 2 and none of Witcher 3, the stuff that I've heard about with Witcher 3, I would say I would more lean towards the way you build a quest and a story progression in an open world game comes from Witcher 3, and a third person gameplay mechanics cover shooting from Mass Effect.
So for me, I would probably say Mass Effect, just because Mass Effect was able to balance that third-person cover shooting along with its like deep story with branching paths and all the character relationship stuff. I feel like that's like the BioWare thing that they were able to do that most games now, if you're an RPG and you don't have like balancing relationships and there's no romance options, it's almost like, what are you doing? Witcher 3 is definitely one of the biggest games to ever hit last gen. It's probably one of the best games of last gen, but I don't think it did anything unique. It just did everything that it did really well, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think they revolutionized anything. I think they just did what other developers did at a higher level than was seen before, if that makes any sense. And Mass Effect was a franchise that was trying some new things, or was trying a newer combination of things that made it more special, as opposed to The Witcher that just did things that were done before but really well and supported the game over a long period of time. Mm-hmm. So to me, Mass Effect is more important.
Branching dialogue, third person, those are all things that, I mean, other games have done those, but they definitely kind of set a standard and then kind of broke their own standard with Andromeda.
And that's more EA being EA at that point.
All right, so that is it for our questions. Feel free to send us other questions. Hashtag AskDigitalDays. You can post them in the Facebook group. You can post them on Twitter. You can post them in our Discord. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, all of our social links, Facebook group, Twitters, Discords, any of those are in the show notes. Teespring's account we have as well with T-shirts, hoodies. And then the patreon.com/digitaldaysgaming, where you can choose to support us through Patreon, $1 tip jar, $3 Discord private channel access, $5 24-hour early access to the show, so you'll get it Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. instead of Thursday morning, and then the $7 gets you the monthly bonus episodes. And those are just multiple ways that you can support us. Then it's just to help us pay some of the bills and take care of some things. So if you're trying to set your budgets for 2020 and you think that you might be able to fit us in there in a support way, those are different ways that you can do so. All of them are always appreciative, but never required. The biggest thing that we ask from you guys is just to share the show. just to let more people hear the show, more people listen to the show. Hopefully, more people to join the community. That's all that we're looking to do, is to grow a community. We release weekly, consistent content every single week for 64 plus weeks, with other content released over time when the industry warrants it. So I don't know. You got anything else, bud?
No, just hit us with some reviews on iTunes. Those help the most in terms of getting our name out there. Usually if we get a couple reviews, we end up trending on some charts and stuff like that. So definitely hit us up with that. But yeah, that's it.
All right. I hope everyone has a great week. Keep moving forward.
Don't be a dick. See ya.